The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, stood quietly in her private study, her fingers trembling as she held the official letter that would change everything. The royal seal at the top seemed to mock her as she read the words for the 10th time that morning. William found her there an hour later, still frozen in the same spot. His footsteps echoed softly as he approached, and without saying a word, he knew. The way her shoulders sagged, the way she clutched the paper like it might disappear if she let go. He had seen this look before, but never quite like this, Kate, he whispered, his voice barely audible in the vast room. She turned slowly, her blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. The strong, composed woman the world knew and loved was gone, replaced by someone fragile and scared. "They want us to make a choice, William," she said, her voice breaking on his name. "The Commonwealth Council has issued an ultimatum. They believe our recent charitable work in Africa has overstepped traditional royal boundaries. We've become too involved, too political in their eyes." William's jaw tightened as he reached for the letter. His eyes scanned the formal language, each word hitting him like a physical blow. The council was demanding they either completely abandon their humanitarian mission work or step back from their royal duties entirely. There was no middle ground, no compromise offered. "This is about the water project, isn't it?" William asked, though he already knew the answer. Their recent trip to Kenya had resulted in them directly funding and overseeing the installation of clean water systems in 12 villages. They had worked alongside local communities, slept in modest accommodations, and gotten their hands dirty in ways that made some council members uncomfortable. Catherine nodded, wiping away a tear that had finally escaped. "They say we've forgotten our place. That royals should observe and patron, not participate and lead. But William, those children we met, little Amara who walked 6 miles every day for dirty water, how can we just observe that?" The irony was not lost on either of them. Their work had brought them closer than ever before, both to each other and to their true purpose. Yet now it threatened to tear apart everything they had built together as future leaders of the monarchy. William pulled Kate into his arms, feeling her body shake with silent sobs. Outside, life continued as normal. Tourists gathered at the palace gates, hoping for a glimpse of the fairy tale couple. Social media buzzed with photos from their recent African trip, praising their hands-on approach to charity work. The world had no idea that behind the palace walls, their beloved prince and princess were facing an impossible decision. As they held each other in the silence of the study, both knew that whatever choice they made would leave someone heartbroken. The question was whether they would choose duty to an institution or duty to their hearts and the people who needed them most. The very foundation of their future together hung in the balance, and time was running out to decide. The emergency family meeting was called for that evening. Queen Elizabeth II sat at the head of the ornate dining table, her weathered hands folded carefully in her lap. Despite her advanced age, her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had guided the monarchy for decades. Charles and Camilla sat to her right, while William and Catherine took their places across from them. The silence stretched uncomfortably until the Queen finally spoke. "I understand you both have received the Council's concerns," she began, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I want you to know that I did not influence their decision, but I cannot overturn it either." William leaned forward, his frustration barely contained. "Grandmother, with all due respect, the monarchy is supposed to evolve. We've seen what happens when institutions refuse to change with the times. People lose faith, they lose respect. And yet," Charles interjected quietly, "we have protocols and boundaries for good reason. The moment we become political activists rather than neutral figureheads, we risk everything our family has built over centuries." Catherine spoke for the first time since they had arrived. "Your Majesty, when we were in Kenya last month, I held a baby who was dying from preventable diseases. Her mother looked at me with such hope, believing that our presence meant real change was coming. How do I explain to her that our position prevents us from actually helping?" The Queen's expression softened slightly. "My dear Catherine, I have faced similar heartbreak many times in my 70 years of service. There have been countless moments when I wanted to act, to speak out, to use this position for what seemed like obvious good. But the crown is bigger than any one person's desires." "Is it bigger than our humanity?" William asked, his voice heavy with emotion. Kate and I didn't choose each other just to sit in palaces and wave at crowds. We chose each other because we share the same values, the same desire to make a real difference. Camilla reached across the table and touched Catherine's hand gently. We've all been where you are now. The weight of duty versus the pull of your heart. It's the burden every member of this family must bear. Catherine looked around the table at these people who had become her family, who understood the unique pressures of royal life. The council has given us 2 weeks to decide. 2 weeks to choose between everything we've worked for in our marriage and the institution that brought us together. The Queen stood slowly, her movement causing everyone else to rise respectfully. I cannot tell you what to choose, but I will tell you this. Whatever decision you make, you must be prepared to live with the consequences for the rest of your lives. There will be no going back. As the family began to disperse, the Queen called William aside. Your grandfather faced a similar choice once, she said quietly. He chose duty over his personal desires, and it shaped our entire marriage. He never regretted it, but he also never forgot what he gave up. Make sure you can say the same about whatever path you choose. That night, William and Catherine lay awake in their bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of decision pressed down on them like a physical force. Outside their window, London sparkled with 1,000 lights, a city full of people who looked to them for inspiration and leadership. What if we're wrong? Catherine whispered in the darkness. What if choosing our mission work means losing everything else we've built together? William turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming through their curtains. And what if we're wrong to give up the chance to really change lives? What if we become just another generation of royals who chose comfort over courage? The questions hung between them like ghosts, and neither had answers that could guarantee the future they both desperately wanted. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Kensington Palace. Harry arrived unannounced, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced with concern etched deep in his features. He had heard whispers of the ultimatum through palace staff, and despite the complicated history between the brothers, he knew William needed family support. I came as soon as I heard, Harry said, settling into the familiar sitting room where they had spent countless hours as children. Meghan sends her love. She wanted to come but thought this conversation might be easier with just us. Catherine excused herself to give the brothers privacy, but not before Harry caught her hand. Kate, whatever you both decide, you know we're behind you completely. You've both shown more courage in 5 years than most royals show in a lifetime. When they were alone, William slumped into his chair like the weight of the crown was already crushing him. Harry, I don't know what to do. Every instinct tells me to fight this, to choose the work over the institution. But then I think about George, Charlotte, and Louis. What kind of legacy am I leaving them? Harry was quiet for a long moment, remembering his own struggles with royal expectations. You know, when Meghan and I left, everyone said we chose love over duty. But honestly, I think we chose authenticity over pretense. The question you have to ask yourself is, what does authentic service look like for you and Kate? But it's different for you, William protested. You were the spare. I'm the heir. Everything I do affects the future of the monarchy itself. Maybe that's exactly why you need to make this choice from your heart, Harry replied. The monarchy needs leaders who believe in something more than tradition. People can sense authenticity, William. They could see it in your Africa work. Kate was never more radiant than when she was teaching those children to read. Their conversation was interrupted by Catherine returning with tea, her eyes red from crying. She had spent the morning reading letters from the Kenyan villages they had visited. Local leaders were already planning follow-up projects based on their promises to return with more resources and support. Read this, Catherine said, handing William a letter written in careful English by Amara, the young girl whose daily water walks had moved them both. The child's words were simple but powerful. Dear Princess Kate and Prince William, because of you, I can go to school now instead of walking for water. My little sister will never know what dirty water tastes like. Thank you for seeing us. William's hands shook as he finished reading. How do we turn our backs on this? How do we explain to these children that royal protocol is more important than their futures? Harry watched his brother struggle with the same demons that had driven his own decisions. You know what Father always says about duty, he offered quietly. But maybe duty isn't just about preserving an institution. Maybe it's about using whatever power you have to serve others. Catherine sat beside her husband, taking his hand in hers. I keep thinking about our wedding day, she said softly. When we made those vows in front of the world. We promised to support each other in service to others. Not service to a system, but to people. The council will never understand that, William said bitterly. They see our work as radical, as overstepping boundaries that have existed for centuries. Then maybe those boundaries need to change, Harry said firmly. The world is different now than when those rules were written. People want their leaders to lead, not just exist. As afternoon turned to evening, the three of them sat in contemplative silence. Outside, life continued normally, but inside the palace walls, the future of the monarchy hung in the balance. The choice between tradition and transformation had never felt more personal or more urgent. Whatever you decide, Harry said as he prepared to leave. Remember that being royal doesn't mean being perfect. It means being human enough to make the hard choices and live with them honestly. After Harry left, William and Catherine found themselves back in the study where this crisis had begun. The letter from the council still sat on the desk, but now it was joined by dozens of letters from Africa, each one a reminder of what their choice would mean for people far beyond the palace walls. 3 days into their 2-week deadline, Catherine made a decision that surprised even William. She announced she was traveling to Africa alone, without royal protocol or media fanfare, to see the projects they had started and speak with the communities they had promised to help. Kate, that's impossible, William protested as she packed a simple bag in their bedroom. You can't just disappear from your royal duties. The council will see this as another act of defiance. Then let them, Catherine replied, her voice steady with newfound determination. I need to see those children's faces again. I need to remember why we started this work in the first place. All these palace meetings and formal letters are making me forget what really matters. William grabbed her hands, stopping her packing. If you go, I'm coming with you. No, she said firmly. You need to stay here and handle the political side of this. Meet with the council members individually. Try to find someone who might understand our position. I'll go to Africa and document everything we'll be walking away from if we choose to stay. The next morning, Catherine boarded a commercial flight under an assumed name, accompanied only by a single protection officer. News of her departure was kept strictly confidential, known only to William and her immediate staff. Meanwhile, William spent his days in endless meetings. He sat across from Lord Pemberton, the most influential member of the Commonwealth Council, in a stuffy office filled with portraits of long-dead royals. Your Highness, Lord Pemberton said, adjusting his glasses, you must understand our position. The monarchy's strength lies in its consistency, its stability. When royals begin acting like activists, the institution loses its neutral authority. But what good is authority if it's not used to help people? William asked, frustration creeping into his voice. My grandmother has been queen for 70 years precisely because people trust her judgment. They trust our family to do what's right. The queen has maintained that trust by staying above politics, by never appearing to favor one cause over another. Pemberton replied coldly, your African projects, while admirable in spirit, cross lines that must not be crossed. William left that meeting feeling more frustrated than ever. It seemed impossible to make the council understand that helping people should transcend politics. Catherine's journey to Africa was everything the council would have feared. In Kenya, she was greeted not by official delegations but by children running barefoot through dusty streets. She visited the water pumps that were already changing lives, sat in school classrooms where literacy rates had improved dramatically, and held babies who were healthy because of the medical supplies she and William had personally funded. In the evening, she video-called William from a modest guest house, her face lit by a single lamp. William, you should see this place now. The school we visited has doubled in size. They've named it after us, the William and Catherine Learning Center. How can we abandon this? William could see the passion burning in his wife's eyes, the same fire that had first attracted him to her years ago. Show me, he said simply. For the next hour, Catherine walked him through the village via her phone camera. He saw the well they had funded pumping clean water for hundreds of families. He watched children reading books in English and Swahili, skills that would open doors their parents never had. He met village elders who spoke of William and Catherine not as distant royals, but as partners in building a better future. The people here don't care about Commonwealth Council protocols, Catherine said as she returned to her room. They care about whether their children will have better lives than they did. That's what we promised them, William. That's what we built our marriage on. That night, William sat alone in Kensington Palace, surrounded by the trappings of royal privilege, yet feeling more isolated than ever. The contrast between Catherine's vibrant video calls from Africa and the sterile formality of his council meetings was stark and troubling. He found himself walking through the palace halls, past portraits of ancestors who had faced their own impossible choices. Some had chosen duty over desire and were remembered as steadfast leaders. Others had followed their hearts and been written out of history as failures. But as he paused before a portrait of his mother, Diana, William realized that the most beloved members of his family had been those who broke the rules to serve others. Diana's work with AIDS patients and landmine victims had initially scandalized the establishment, but ultimately transformed the monarchy's relationship with the world. When Catherine called the next morning, William had made a decision that would surprise her. "Come home," he said quietly. "It's time we made our choice together." Catherine returned from Africa transformed, her eyes holding a clarity that hadn't been there when she left. She and William spent hours locked in deep conversation, not as prince and princess, but as partners facing the most important decision of their lives together. "I've been thinking about our children," Catherine said as they walked through the private gardens of Kensington Palace. "What world are we preparing them for? One where duty means following outdated rules, or one where leadership means having the courage to do what's right?" William nodded, his own thoughts having traveled similar paths during her absence. "I met with the Archbishop yesterday. He reminded me that service to God and service to humanity should never be at odds. If our position prevents us from helping those who need it most, then perhaps we need to redefine what our position means." They had called another family meeting, this time with their children present. George, at 10 years old, was beginning to understand the weight of his future role. Charlotte and Louis sat quietly, sensing the gravity of the conversation without fully grasping its implications. "Daddy," George asked during dinner, "are you and Mummy going to stop being prince and princess?" The innocence of his question cut through all the political complexity. William and Catherine exchanged glances before William knelt beside his eldest son. "George, being royal isn't about titles or crowns. It's about using whatever gifts you have to help make the world better. Mummy and I are trying to decide the best way to do that." Charlotte, wise beyond her 7 years, added, "Like when we helped pack food for the hungry people last Christmas?" "Exactly like that," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes helping people means making choices that other people don't understand." That night, after the children were in bed, William and Catherine made their final decision. They would not abandon their humanitarian work, regardless of the consequences. They would present the council with a compromise proposal, but if it was rejected, they were prepared to step back from their royal roles to continue their mission work as private citizens. The proposal they drafted was revolutionary by royal standards. They requested permission to establish an independent humanitarian foundation that would operate outside traditional royal protocols. They would maintain their titles but work with complete autonomy in their charitable endeavors. In exchange, they would step back from ceremonial duties and state functions, focusing entirely on their mission work. "It's a long shot," William admitted as they finalized their proposal, "but it allows us to serve both the crown and our conscience." Catherine added her signature to the document with steady hands. "If they reject this, we'll know that the institution values conformity more than compassion. And if that's the case, then we don't belong in it anyway." The next morning, they requested an audience with the Queen. Elizabeth II received them in her private study, the same room where she had made countless difficult decisions during her long reign. "Grandmother," William began, "we've come to present our solution to the Council's ultimatum." The Queen read their proposal in silence, her expression revealing nothing. When she finished, she set the papers down and studied her grandson and his wife for a long moment. "This is unprecedented," she said finally. "What you're proposing would fundamentally change how the monarchy operates." "Perhaps it's time for that change," Catherine said respectfully but firmly. "The world has changed dramatically since these protocols were established. People expect their leaders to lead, not just exist as symbols." The Queen walked to her window, gazing out at the London streets below. "I've spent my entire life trying to preserve this institution, but I've also watched it evolve and adapt to remain relevant. Your proposal is radical, but it's not without merit." She turned back to face them, and for a moment they saw not the Queen, but a grandmother who understood the weight of impossible choices. I cannot guarantee the council will accept this. Some members view any change as a threat to everything we represent, but I will support your proposal in the final meeting. As they left the Queen's chambers, William and Catherine felt a mixture of hope and terror. They had played their final card, proposed their last compromise. In 3 days, the council would meet to decide their fate, and with it, the future direction of the monarchy itself. That evening, they sat with their children again, reading stories and playing games, trying to maintain normalcy while their entire world hung in the balance. Whatever happened in 3 days would change their family forever, and they could only hope they were making the right choice for everyone they loved. The day of the council meeting arrived with gray London skies that matched the somber mood in Kensington Palace. William and Catherine dressed carefully, knowing this might be their last day as working members of the royal family. They had spent the morning with their children, trying to explain that whatever happened, their family would remain strong. The Commonwealth Council convened in the formal chambers of Buckingham Palace, a room steeped in centuries of royal tradition. 12 men and women sat around an ancient oak table, their faces revealing nothing as William and Catherine took their seats at the far end. Lord Pemberton called the meeting to order, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Your Royal Highnesses, we are here to consider your proposal and render a final decision regarding your future roles within the monarchy. William stood first, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. Members of the council, my wife and I have presented what we believe is a reasonable compromise. We're asking for the freedom to serve humanity while still honoring our commitment to the crown. Lady Morrison, one of the younger council members, leaned forward. Your Highness, your work in Africa has been admirable, but it has also been divisive. We've received complaints from other Commonwealth nations who feel you've shown favoritism to certain regions and causes. Catherine rose to respond, her voice calm but passionate. With respect, Lady Morrison, human suffering isn't political. A child dying from lack of clean water doesn't care about Commonwealth politics. Our work has been guided by need, not favoritism. The debate continued for hours, with council members raising concerns about precedent, political neutrality, and institutional stability. Some argued that William and Catherine's proposal would open doors for other royals to pursue personal agendas under the guise of humanitarian work. Then Queen Elizabeth II entered the chamber, her presence immediately commanding silence and respect. She had not been scheduled to attend, and her appearance sent ripples of surprise through the room. Your Majesty, Lord Pemberton said, rising quickly, we weren't expecting you. I felt my presence was necessary for this decision, the Queen replied, taking her seat at the head of the table. I have listened to your deliberations and I have something to say. The room fell completely silent as the monarch who had guided Britain for 7 decades prepared to speak. Throughout my reign, I have watched this institution evolve and adapt to changing times. We survived 2 world wars, the end of empire, and countless social revolutions because we learned when to bend rather than break. She paused, her gaze moving to William and Catherine, before returning to the council. Members, my grandson and his wife, represent something this monarchy has rarely seen: genuine passion for service combined with the skills and determination to create real change. Their work in Africa has brought more positive attention to the Commonwealth than any ceremonial function in recent memory. Lord Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, surely tradition and protocol must be preserved. Tradition without purpose becomes mere performance, the Queen interrupted, her voice sharp with authority. These two have reminded us that royalty is not about privilege, it's about responsibility. The Queen stood and everyone in the room rose with her. I am not merely supporting their proposal. I am ordering its implementation. William and Catherine will establish their humanitarian foundation with full royal backing. They will reduce their ceremonial duties to focus on this work, but they will retain their titles and their place in the line of succession. The silence that followed was deafening. Several council members looked stunned, while others appeared angry at having their authority superseded. But the Queen's word was final, and everyone in the room knew it. Furthermore, the Queen continued, this foundation will be funded partially through the Crown Estate, making it an official royal charitable institution. Their work will not be seen as separate from their royal duties. It will be the new definition of what royal service means in the modern era. As the meeting concluded, and the council members filed out in various states of shock and resignation, William and Catherine remained seated, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. The Queen approached them, her expression softer now that the formal proceedings were over. "You fought for what you believe in," she said quietly. "That's what leaders do. Don't make me regret supporting you." Catherine rose and, breaking protocol, embraced her grandmother-in-law. "You've given us the chance to serve as we always dreamed. We won't waste it." As they left Buckingham Palace that afternoon, William and Catherine walked hand in hand through the corridors that had once felt like a prison, but now felt like the foundation for their real work to begin. They had won an impossible victory, but they knew the hardest part was still ahead, proving that their new model of royal service could change lives and inspire a new generation of leaders. 6 months after the historic council meeting, William and Catherine stood together in the same Kenyan village where their journey had truly begun. But this time they weren't visiting as ceremonial guests. They were there as partners in a transformation that had exceeded everyone's expectations. The William and Catherine Foundation had become a model for modern royal service, with projects spanning 5 continents and partnerships with local organizations that ensured sustainable change. The water systems they had fought to protect were now part of a larger network serving over 50 villages. The school that had been named after them was one of 12 new learning centers built with foundation support. Princess Kate, Prince William, little Amara ran toward them, no longer the water-carrying child they had first met, but a confident 8-year-old who spoke 3 languages and dreamed of becoming a doctor. She handed Catherine a drawing of their family standing beside the village well. "We made this for you," Amara said in careful English, "to remember that you kept your promise." As they toured the village that afternoon, William and Catherine were struck by how much had changed since their first visit. Solar panels powered the school and clinic. Young women who had once spent hours collecting water were now learning to read and starting small businesses. Men who had been farmers their entire lives were training as water technicians and teachers. But the most profound change was in William and Catherine themselves. The stress lines that had marked their faces during the council crisis had been replaced by a sense of purpose that radiated from both of them. They moved through the village not as distant royals making a charitable visit, but as invested partners celebrating shared achievements. That evening, they sat with village elders around a fire, sharing stories and planning future projects. The formality of royal protocol had been replaced by genuine relationship building. Catherine taught children songs in English while learning traditional lullabies in return. William discussed water conservation techniques with local engineers, his sleeves rolled up and his hands dirty from examining pump mechanisms. "You know," Catherine said to William as they walked back to their modest guest house, "I think we're finally doing what we were meant to do." "The Queen was right," William replied, looking up at the star-filled African sky. "We had to redefine what royal service means. We couldn't do that from behind palace walls. Their transformation had not gone unnoticed back in Britain. Public support for the monarchy had reached levels not seen since the early days of the Queen's reign. Young people, in particular, saw William and Catherine as proof that leadership could be both principled and practical. Other members of the royal family had begun developing their own innovative approaches to service, inspired by the success of the foundation. The council members who had initially opposed their plan now found themselves defending it against critics who argued it hadn't gone far enough. Lord Pemberton himself had visited one of their projects in Bangladesh and returned to London as an unexpected advocate for expanded royal humanitarian work. But it was the personal transformation that mattered most to William and Catherine. Their marriage had deepened through shared struggle and shared victory. Their children saw parents who lived their values rather than just speaking about them. George had asked to visit Africa on his next school holiday, wanting to see the places where Mummy and Daddy help people. On their last night in Kenya, Catherine and William received a video call from their children back in London. George, Charlotte, and Louis had organized a fundraiser at their school, raising money for books for the Kenyan learning centers. They had enlisted their classmates, teachers, and even some parents in their effort. "We wanted to help too," George said proudly, showing them a poster he had made advertising their book drive. "Charlotte said we should follow your example of helping people." After they ended the call, William and Catherine sat quietly in their simple room, listening to the sounds of the African night. Tomorrow they would return to London, to royal duties that now felt meaningful rather than burdensome, to a life that balanced tradition with transformation. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had chosen differently?" Catherine asked, her head resting on William's shoulder. "Sometimes," William admitted, "but then I think about Amara learning to read, or George wanting to help other children, or the Queen telling us we reminded her why she became a public servant in the first place. How could we have chosen anything else?" As they prepared for sleep, both knew that their silent farewell to their old lives had led not to loss, but to a fuller, more authentic existence than either had dared to imagine. They had risked everything to serve with their hearts as well as their titles, and in doing so, they had discovered what it truly meant to be royal in the modern world. The tears that millions had shed during their crisis had transformed into tears of joy and pride. William and Catherine had shown the world that love, for each other, for their values, and for humanity itself, was not a weakness to be hidden behind protocol, but a strength that could reshape institutions and inspire generations.